What up, infidels? Another episode of the Dangerous Brown podcast coming at you. Hopefully things are going well. Just a couple notes of housekeeping before we begin. I know there's been a weird buzzing noise the last couple episodes. I'm trying to figure that out. I got a new cable. I might have to replace my recorder, maybe the mic. I don't know what's going on. Hopefully it won't happen again this episode. If it does, I'm sorry, but hopefully it's not getting in the way of you enjoying the episodes. Yeah. For all you new people coming in, Wednesday I do current events, and Friday is like whatever segment I have sort of planned and cooked up. And so let's get right into it. So, Saddam Hussein wrote a romance novel called Zabiba and the King. And I read it, and that's what we're going to be going over today on the Dangerous Brown podcast. We're going to go over Zabiba and the King. Now, before I even talk about the book, hey, guy who wrote the book, fuck you for doing this, huh? Just a giant face of Saddam? You couldn't come up with an illustration of Zabiba and the King? When I found the book on Amazon, I was like, oh, great. Why not add me to another list, huh? I'm sure I'm not on enough. Might as well order a book with the giant face of Saddam Hussein in the middle of it. Really threw me to the wolves on that one, guy who wrote this. Robert Lawrence. Hey, man. Specifically, fuck you for this, huh? This is so much. Shout out to Ryan Tresky. His history TikTok is how I found out about this, and I was like, ooh, I gotta take off the jacket. It's already that cold. His history already that warm. His history TikTok is how I found out about it, and then, yeah, I was like, let me read this book. And I got this book thinking like, oh man, this will be an interesting look into Saddam's psyche, and it is. How he thinks, how he rolls, how he hangs, how he feels about love and relationships. That's what I thought, and I thought maybe there might be like some erotic scenes, maybe. Some saucy scenes. Get that, that Iraqi sauce, hot. I thought it was gonna be hot and heavy in Baghdad over here. That's what I kind of got. I was hoping it would be smutty, and bro, the Bible is smuttier than this book. This book is the least amount of smut I've ever read, ever. The Cat in the Hat is more smutty than this. This book is so dry. To call it a romance novel, and online it's on the back of the book, it's even described as a romance novel. It says, Zabiba and the King is an allegorical love story between a mighty king, Saddam, and a simple yet beautiful commoner, Zabiba, who represent the Iraqi people. Zabiba is married to a cruel, unloving husband, the United States, who forces himself upon her against her will. This act of rape is compared to the United States invasion of Iraq. Now, that's basically what the story is about. I mean, that is what the story is about. There is very little love in this love story. Zabiba and the King meet, and I'll go over what happens, but Zabiba and the King meet, and they're just, like, kind of in love. The vibe I get from this is, like, I've been told this about myself. I've been called, how there's, like, hopeless romantics? I have been called romantically hopeless. And I don't necessarily disagree with this. Where I just romance kind of escapes me. I'm not very romantic, which is not to say that like people people don't like me or whatever. It's just that I'm not the most romantic person. I just don't get it, I guess. Regardless, that's what Saddam strikes me as, Basically, I'm just trying to say I'm a lot like Saddam. No, I'm kidding. But that's the sort of like, there's no wooing involved, right? And that's sort of Saddam's sort of, I guess, take on love, because he's so powerful that he doesn't have to be romantic. He can have any body in the kingdom that he wants. I mean, he has wives. The king has wives in this book. He has concubine after concubine. But there's no like romance. There's no like the simple. There's no flowers even. You feel what I'm saying? There's not a very. It's just it's more of a like philosophical discussion. That's how I describe this book. This book, look, for those of you who are like, ooh, a Saddam love story, this might be interesting. This book is so incredibly dry and so incredibly boring. It is very boring. Now, there are interesting things in terms of Saddam's psyche that I'll parse out for you, but if you're like, oh, maybe I should read this book, no, you shouldn't. There's only one person in the world who should read this book, and he's probably going to watch this episode, so shout out to my friend Stephen Randolph. That's why I wore your wife's face on my shirt for this episode, specifically for you. I know how Saddam obsessed you are. You should read this book. Everyone else, skip it. Skip it. It is. Apparently, Saddam has written 4 books, and I think this was the only one that was translated to English. I could be wrong. I have to look that up again. But after reading this, I get why. The dude just is not the best writer at all. His sense of story structure is bad. Like, narrative structure is bad. The way things flow, things don't make it. One thing doesn't lead logically to the next, and then there's this whole like, again, I'll go into depth later, but this whole like rebellion subplot that comes out of nowhere, and it's that he ties to Allah for somehow that doesn't make any sense. Like it just doesn't make sense. His narrative Saddam Hussein's narrative structure. How do I explain this? Okay, there are 2 people, artist-wise, whose story structure that I absolutely hate, and it's Saddam Hussein and Wes Anderson. I put them in the same category in terms of dude. At least Wes Anderson's stuff looks really pretty and it's like really artistic, and it's like, he hasn't murdered thousands of people, but like in terms of story structure, bro, I put you up there with this dude. And it's like, dude, your stories just kind of make no sense. At least to me. I don't know. I just wanted to give a parting shot to Wes Anderson here. All right, so let's get into it. This is at the end of the day, it is a work of propaganda. And at least I will say this about American propaganda, especially after reading this, is that at least American propaganda is entertaining. I remember watching, I think it was Fast 7. I want to say Fast and the Furious 7. And the premise of the movie, it's one of the Fast and the Furious, is that there's this hacker that creates this code that can let you hack into any single electronic device, cell phones, surveillance cameras, whatnot, and you could just control it, right? What's going on here? Oh, is that coffee? Hey, I'm about to get some coffee here. This is nice. But yeah, I'll get back to Fast. So there's Fast 7, right? And the point of Fast 7 is that there's this I'll get to it in a second. Hey, Baba, you want to say hi to the camera? No, you don't want to say hi to the camera? No Baba cameo today for you guys. All right. Rewind. Sorry, I got distracted. Right. So Fast 7, there is this hacker who creates this device that can hack into any sort of electronic thing, sort of like the device in The Dark Knight at the end where he uses to find the Joker, and he creates the map or whatever. And the whole point of the movie is Vin Diesel and his family have to go and get the device and give it to the American government, because the government doesn't want that device in the right hands, and that device in the American government's hands is a good thing because we're the good guys, and that is straight propaganda. And at the very least, if you're going to give me propaganda like that and make me consume it, at least put it around a shell that is Fast and the Furious. Put it around the shell of one of the most entertaining movie series of all time. Fast and the Furious is amazing. I mean, I describe it as, and I've said this many times, watching Fast and the Furious is like if you ever played with cars as a kid, just like Hot Wheels around your house, and you're like driving around random stuff, like it's on the TV and you're going vroom, vroom, vroom. That's Fast and the Furious is that, but for adults. It's playing with Hot Wheels, but for adults, okay? That's why I love it. And that's the perfect way to feed you propaganda. This book is not the way to do it. I read a lot about this book, like as sort of the background. Um, People made it, it was like it was a bestseller in Iraq. It was made into like it was one of the most successful plays they ever made, and it's the only way a story like this gets there is if the dictator in the country is propping it up, and you kind of have to read it. But yeah, I mean, it's straight up Iraqi propaganda in the first pages. So the premise of the book is there's a bunch of kids sitting around a grandmother in quote unquote present day Iraq, or 20th century Iraq, and the grandmother is telling the story about a 6th century king in Iraq and his love, the great love he has with a common woman, the woman of the people, and her name is Zabiba. I mean, as far as the propaganda goes, it starts off immediately in one of the first pages. One of the quotes is, if everything were judged honestly, half of the monuments called Wonders of the World could have been on the grounds of Iraq. And Iraq is a religious place, and it's one of the most holiest places in all of life. Just talking up Iraq. So the grandma is telling it, she's had a hard life, and this is the story of Zabiba, which is is the champion of the people throughout all of this. So in the world of the king, we find out that the king is this leader of this country, leader of, I will just call it Iraq, and Iraq at the point is bent to foreign interests, as the allegory to, Saddam's current day Iraq. When I say current day Iraq, just assume I mean when Saddam is leading it. Current day Iraq, which is everyone's trying to get to their oil. The U.S. has a strong presence. The U.S. is the bad guy in this story. So in the King's Iraq in 6th century, which is the allegory for present day Iraq, the outside interests, they call them merchants. These money dealers are coming in and they're screwing over the people to get what they want. Let's see. So the king. So we start the story, and the king is out. He's out and about, and he's lonely. King is lonely. He feels all alone, even though he has a queen, he has concubines. Even in his palace, the king feels alone, and he goes to this big merchant's house. This Miskil, I believe his name is. I forgot because he's kind of important to the story, but he's not. And at the edge of this merchant's house, he sees a little hut where he sees Zabiba and her husband. And he says he sees Zabiba, and the king fell in love with Zabiba in a way he had not loved any of his wives or concubines. That's just the sort of depth of the love that you see here. Is that every once in a while, so the entire story, it's just Zabiba and the king talking. That's the entire story in the king's chamber. And the extent of the love in this is every once in a while they'll be like, and the king has never loved Zabiba, and Zabiba never loved anyone like he loves Zabiba. And randomly they'll be like, and Zabiba loved the king with all her heart. And it never gets, even though they're in the king's bedroom alone, and she's with the most powerful man in the kingdom, they never get sexual. The quote unquote the most sexual that they get is that Zabiba will be like, Zabiba couldn't control herself and grabbed the king's face and kissed his forehead. And the king saw Zabiba in pain and kissed her forehead. That's the most that they get. They never kiss lips. There's no lips in this, which is like, bro, do you know how hard it was to jerk off to this? I had to do it to philosophical discussions. Come on, Saddam. Help a brother out. I was like, because I gotta do it. It's a romance novel. If I don't do it, I'm sullying the romance genre. Really. You know how hard it is to jerk off to the words, oh, the king should listen to the will of his people. I'm like, I'm trying, Saddam. I'm trying, but you're not helping me out here. I need a little more salaciousness. Dude, no one takes off any articles of clothing. It's like, come on. Come on. Yeah, it's just all they have the like. Also, this like this book is just so. At oftentimes it's just almost deep, and at page 10, let's see if I can find it here. They just have a talk about raisins, and it's like he tries to make it apply to everything else outside of raisins. Okay. Here's the quote. After the chief of guards left, the guards decided to entertain themselves with this conversation. Which, hey, you don't need to say that. Now, this being said, before I read this, I realize there's a lot that could be lost in translation. Arabic is not a Romance language like English is. It's not a Germanic language that English is. So the translations aren't going to be perfect, and maybe some of that is lost in this. So I will give Saddam this much credit. But still, even if it's remotely like this, it's like, bro, what are you talking about? All right, so after the chief of guards left, the guards decided to entertain themselves with this conversation. One of them said, I would not mind having some raisins today. And a second guard asked him, where will you get your raisins? Where will you get you raisins? That's a mistake on the editor's part. Then another said, does a man always want what he cannot have? And yet another added, it is shameful, my brother, to dream in one's imagination. Is it shameful, my brother, to dream in one's imagination, something that one can't have? Then the previous asked, so I don't even know who's talking at this point, why torture your soul with what you cannot have? It is only a torment. His friend answered, again, who's talking, a man's soul cannot exist in a way that he will demand of it. That is, without hope that it will reach beyond the limits of what is possible. Then the previous guard replied, there's like 6 previous guards, so who knows? If hope is a state of power, as you suggest, which is inside of a man prior to his acting to make that hope a reality, then is it not your hope in this case and a dream equally torturous? Because are we not destined to reside within the palace walls to guard it till they discharge us from the service, even though we see that people do not like those who live here, and therefore probably do not like us either? Dude, what did I read the words exactly word for word to you guys, and what were they talking about? They tried to make this point about raisins and this whole thing about hope that doesn't come across at all. I don't know what he's trying to say. And the whole damn story is like that. I could go to any page, and it's just people waxing poetic about nothing. Did you say that you are free in my palace, and that because your love for me and my love for you, you have regained your soul? I remember you saying that you lost your soul when you married. It's just a random page that I picked up, and the quote that I'm reading from, this piece of dialogue goes on for about a page. This is what happens when you write something and you don't have anyone who can proofread it honestly. Because that's what he needs. He needs someone to proofread this honestly and be like, bro, cut out a lot of these words. A lot of these words. It is just who cares, dude. I'm not trying to spend too long. I was hoping to give you guys more, but I don't want to spend too long, of course, on a boring book. Although I think I'm already like 20 minutes in, if I had to guess, right? So I'll try to move it along. Let's see. So Zabiba comes to the king's palace after they meet. And basically her entire goal is to get the king to abolish the monarchy and install a democratic people's council, which here we get into the psyche of Saddam. And I feel this way a lot about dictators, is that there is a weird constant war. A lot of people who are involved in the death of many people are in rage inside their bodies, right? Saddam killed a lot of people, and he's writing this book that is about, like, what he thinks there actually be. And he's telling him that it should be run by a people's council that abolishes an absolute monarchy, that, listens to the people over the will. The will of the people means way more than the will of the king. Means Saddam is secondary to the will of the people, and yet he does not run his country like that. he is a totalitarian leader. And yet, in this book, he's writing about how all these high-minded ideals of freedom and choice, people should have these choice, and the king shouldn't live like a king. Zabiba tells his king this all the time, that he should live like the common person, so he knows what they feel, and that's where a true king derives his great power. And yet, he does not live like this. And you see this time and time again in history with people who are terrible murderers, that there's a weird split in their personality that they have to deal with. For Saddam, I think is right in this book, Hitler was messed up. He couldn't deal with what was going on in his head. Even a person involved in less death, let's say George W. Bush, someone that people say is a war criminal. If you take a look at his paintings, there's a great painting of him. He's in the shower and he's just staring at himself in the mirror. And my friend described it to me as haunting, and it is. It's a man you can see that's having trouble dealing with himself. And that's what this book is. Saddam is getting advice from Zabiba, the king of the people who he truly loves, telling the king to get rid of the kingdom, to get rid of himself, his position of power. And he's forcing the people to buy this book and consume this book in the play. And I think Saddam cannot see what's going on, the irony of all of that. Zabiba tells him to set up a people's council, and she leaves and comes back. On the way back, there's word going around that this commoner is here. So the queen accosts Zabiba, and Zabiba mentally destroys her. They go on this back and forth, and the queen says, well, what does he love about you, Zabiba? You're just a commoner. And Zabiba says, well, that's because, queen, all you care about is status. You don't care about the man that is the king. I don't care about the man. I don't care about his status. I care about the man that's the king. That's why he loves me and I love him. Zabiba is, time and time again, she's perfect. She's smarter than everyone. She's braver than everyone. She's more beautiful than everyone. She is basically like a Superman. She's, in a story of uninteresting characters, she's the most interesting character. And that should give you, like I said, a sense of how boring the book is if the most interesting character is perfect. No flaws. No flaws in Zabiba. So she, verbally beats the queen up and then has another long chat with the king. All these chats with the king is just convincing him. Hey, common person, be the common person. We find out in her second chat with the king that Zabiba is Muslim and the king is not. The king worships the old gods of the time. We're talking 6th century, 7th century Iraq. So Islam is a new thing. It's advertised as a romance novel, but as I read this, and if you do choose to read this, it reads more like a Bible story from like Exodus, but that has been stretched out to like way too. Imagine if the story of Noah was 192 pages instead of the 3 pages that it was or whatever. There's like a cricket near me and it's making a bird. It's making hella noise. It's awful. That's what this is. It's more like as I call the Bible a creation mythology. This is basically a creation mythology of the glorious state of Iraq as run by the people. So yeah, we hear the story of in the second meeting. We hear while Zabiba is arguing with the queen, by the way, she does this thing. She dismisses herself from the queen's presence without permission. I wonder if you can hear that. If you hear that chirping, I'm sorry. It's just a random cricket or whatever, but I can't do anything about it. So you're just gonna have to. It's just gonna be in the background of all of this. I wonder if my microphone's picking it up. Hold on, I'm gonna be quiet for a second. Oh wow, it's picking up. So yeah, you'll hear it. That's that buzzing in the background. It's just a cricket that's nearby. It's in a tree. God, it's trying to. That's probably its mating call too. So it's like, oh man, you're talking about Zabiba the king. Let me try to have sex with you. That's what's going on. It's trying to mate with me right now. So the Zabiba is a story about a king's mom, and so the king's mom gets poisoned by the concubines of the previous king, and so the king has to get king goes into hiding, exiled in another palace so he doesn't get murdered. Zabiba So the king asks Zabiba if Zabiba has any special agenda. Zabiba says no because she's perfect. She doesn't even see the king status. She sees the man behind the king status, which is impossible. If you're dating a king, there's no way the king aspect doesn't come into play. It just doesn't. That's not how people think. But, Zabiba, like I said, is perfect. So the king's father is eventually poisoned. And the king now then becomes the king. He comes back. So the next day, after hearing the story about the king and his mother and being poisoned and how basically the king is surrounded now by all these people who want to kill him because it's all the king's, like all his cousins and stuff want power. And so it's like it's just a constant game. It's like a Game of Thrones. This is like the Game of Thrones aspect. There's like a Game of Thronesian aspect of it, but they don't really delve into it. There's this like power play for the throne, but you don't really know who's involved and what sides people are on. There's almost a good story in here. There's almost a really cool creation mythology in here, but he focuses too much on the philosophy than the actual mythology. And this book needs to be a little more mythological. Guys, if this is boring, I'm sorry. But this book is what it is. I wanted to do it, and I got I'm going to continue to do it. We'll go back to the Bible next week. We'll go back to the more exciting creation mythology, which is crazy to say because it just had 7 chapters of blueprints in it. So the third meeting, King senses a change in Zabiba, and he wants to know what's wrong. Her husband has forced intimacy on her, so she feels like gross. And the king apparently has spies on Zabiba, and the Zabiba doesn't like that because Zabiba's like, you're supposed to be better than my husband. My husband is always in my business and keeping tabs on me. And when you put spies on me to watch me, it makes me feel bad. And then I can't perform my wifely duties with my husband with you watching me. Like, be better than him, And then Zabiba says how a king can be like a god. Tells the king, like, it may seem like I'm jumping around, but this is how this story jumps around. You'd be like, what? The spies on the husband? What's happening there? What do you mean a king can be like a god? But it goes like that. She goes, hey, stop putting spies on me. And by the way, a king can be like a god. If you truly capture the people's feelings as a king, you become a god. And that's what you should just almost strive to do. And in the middle of this sort of talk about how he should, again, be one with the people, someone tries to assassinate the king. There's a man behind the curtain. And he comes up and tries to stab the king. And as he tries to stab the king, the queen walks in to try to, like, witness the murder. Because the queen's in on the plot. And as someone tries to stab the king, Zabiba jumps in front of him and takes a sword to the chest for the king. And the king side sweeps the assassin and kills him with one blow to the back of the head. Which you can sort of see how powerful Saddam thinks he is. That he can kill an assassin with one blow to the back of the head. So Zabiba is wounded, but bro, the sword to the chest does not affect her at all. In like 2 pages, she's like back up talking and she's fine from her wound. It's pretty funny. It's a pretty like, oh, this is this incredible scene with no consequences. She takes a sword to the chest and is fine. And that sort of seems like Saddam believes that like, that's what the people should do for him at some points, is they have to take a sword to the chest for him. Because he is worth that to the people. So Zabiba Zabiba's like, let me conduct an investigation on who's trying to kill you. And the king's like, okay. And Zabiba's investigation just consists of talking the whole situation out with the king. She doesn't go talk to anyone. She does no investigating. And through this, she says that the queen is involved in the plot because the queen showed up to watch him die. So the punishment for the queen is that she's sent to another palace on house arrest, watched by, instead of her servants, because the queen has servants, watched by the king's servants, someone who's not in the queen's employ. So she's just basically a 6th century version of house arrest. Then we're already on page 80, so we're almost halfway down here. Zabiba then poses to the king after her thorough investigation. She poses to the king, how come a commoner can't rule? A king should live like a commoner, and the government should be based on should not be based on inheritance but merit. So a king's son isn't fit to rule as a king just because he's a king's son. That's what she said. Which, again, a little deep delve into Saddam's psyche here. Is interesting to say because Saddam had a lot of problems with his sons, especially Uday, yeah, his oldest son. Uday was crazy. He was psychopathic, and Saddam did not like him very much. He publicly humiliated him. He exiled him. And that's just Saddam putting his own, like, hey, almost telling his sons, hey, just because you're my sons doesn't mean you're fit to lead this kingdom. This glorious kingdom of Iraq, this religious, beautiful place. So yeah, Zabiba's recovered already. Someone brings tea in, and then Zabiba deduces brilliantly, just from their conversation, that the tea is poisoned, and the king praises Allah for the first time. So the whole time, Zabiba, every once in a while through the conversation, they'll bring up God. Zabiba will talk about Allah. The king will talk about his gods. And when Zabiba saves him from the poison, the king goes, praise Allah, which is like, oh, Zabiba is taking hold of this king. And at this point, it's sort of going throughout the country, like rumors spreading that, hey, there's this commoner that's in the king's ear. And Zabiba has sort of now become the representative of the people. I had to take a sip of that. This is my first sip of coffee. I got this a while ago. Can you imagine? I got too caught up in this terrible book. Oh, now another cricket is chirping over there. So now I think this cricket finally found a mate. Get it, son? Get it, dude. You know, I was mad at the cricket first, but now that he's finally finding some love, I appreciate what he's trying to do. We're all just trying to find love and get laid out here, or get laid out here. So I shouldn't have been so mad at him in the first place, you know? Hell, even Saddam is trying to find love. So who was I to get mad at this cricket for chirping for love behind me? And we're also getting mad at Saddam for writing this love story. You know, maybe the moral of the stories for me is to accept love in whatever form it comes. Maybe love is the form of a 192-page, boring, philosophical, intellectual, narcissistic jerk-off. And maybe that's love, you know? Be open to love. That's the point of all this. So, the guards start treating Zabiba really good when she enters the castle now. So now they have Zabiba's the next meeting, Zabiba and King talk about God, and the king said he hasn't seen his God because someone lost the key to the cabinet that he keeps his God in. And Zabiba said, oh, that's crazy because Allah is all around me. You can see Allah in your soul. There, he's in the air. You know, what if Allah was I think, and then Zabiba says, what if Allah was one of us? You know, just a stranger on the bus. What if Allah was one of us? Just a stranger on the bus. And the king goes, what's a bus? And Zabiba goes, what if Allah was one of us? The king's God is based on material things, while Allah is based on the soul. And so, the king describes his gods as like, oh, he gives you more the more you sacrifice to him. So the more you put in, the more you get out. It's his God is almost quite literally capitalism, I think, here. I don't think that's the point Saddam was trying to make, but that's the point the point that kind of comes across. You got to spend money to make money. That's what God is to the king. And this whole God as a material thing goes on this whole anti-foreigner rant. You know, some people goes, that's why foreigners can come in here and use their merchants and spend their money and have unjust influence over the people of Iraq just because they have money, because of your gods. That's what your gods sort of support. And then there's just like this 3-page anti-foreigner rant, which, is to be expected from Saddam. Let's see. We find out as Zabiba is guiding the king towards a kingdom based on equality, the people in powerful position are getting jealous of Zabiba, and they want to kill the king as a result. Look, this is something that comes up. You'll see over and over again that Zabiba is the one changing the kid's mind. And as a result, all these merchants, she's poisoning her mind. She's poisoning the well. She's saying this merchant class, this sort of noble class, they're in bed with these foreigners. And they're coming in and ruining our country. And you need to work on a government that's for the people and equal for the people of Iraq. And she's getting in the air and she's changing the king's mind. And she's poisoning her, turning her against these merchants. And the king's like, yeah, I'll listen to you, Zabiba. And the way these merchants and these noblemen react is that they want to kill the king. And it's like, no, kill Zabiba. The king is obviously easily swayed. And none of them have even thought to kill Zabiba. It's pretty wild. They want to kill the king. Zabiba feels like she can't preach about loyalty and respect to the king because she's effectively emotionally cheating on her husband. And then finally, 102 pages in, we finally find what kind of piece of shit her husband is. We find her husband's always forcing her into sex. She causes a miscarriage once by kicking her in the stomach, and ever since then, she hasn't been able to have a kid because her soul's willed it. Like, there's nothing in her will that wants her to have a kid. He tells her this game, so they live on the property of this merchant named Miskill, I believe. I forgot his name again. And they play this game where all the wives of the merchants and all the girlfriends of the merchants go into the woods at night, and then all the merchants and the emirs, they call it, that's like the noblemen, the emirs, go out, and then if they find a girl in the wood, it doesn't matter if his wife is not the girl that they find can have sex with them, and they just have sex in the woods, and if you're a nobleman in an emir circle and your wife doesn't want to participate, then you're kicked out. So you have to play this game. But they also portray the women as, oh, I like this game though. I like being morally and sexually loose. His skill, that's his name. Not Miskill. Zabiba, the daughter of the people, curses this game. She poses as a waitress one day to see this game firsthand, and they try to get her to play, but she holds steadfast because she embodies the will of the people, and she's strong and she's moral, and she says no. And when she says no, the king and Zabiba burst out laughing. Of course, Zabiba would never do anything to hurt the king and wrong the king like that. She would never take part in this game for real. The emirs, the noblemen, ask the kings for an audience. At this point, the king says he'll see them later because he knows they want Zabiba to never be allowed in the palace again. So Zabiba continues the story how merchants plot against the less fortunate, and they're willing to share their wives, and they'll even, the merchants are, how evil are the merchants? They'll even let white people in their house. And when Zabiba says the merchants allow white people in the house, she starts crying. Amazing. My favorite part of the book. The only time they mention white people and the most beautiful woman in the world who represents the will of the Iraqi people can't help but burst out but cry because of how evil they are. And I know I have a mostly white audience, so take that, suckers. Saddam doesn't like you. How do you feel about that, son? How do you like them apples? Or how do you like, I guess in the form of this story, how do you like them raisins, baby? I actually laughed at this part. I was like, dude, this is the most unintentionally funny part of the whole thing. I love it. Made me firmly cement Zabiba as one of my favorite characters in all of literature, really. You know, sure, she doesn't have any flaws, and sure, the story is boring, but she bursts out crying at the mention of white people. Love it. Yeah, she wants to be divorced from her husband, but he paid the bride price. There's like a bride price he's got to pay, and it was a purely economic marriage because her dad was poor, so he had to take the money. She has to pay him back before the divorce, and the king agrees to pay her divorce, the bride price for her to get divorced, because the king is a massive Zabiba simp. The king asks Zabiba to describe her love for him, and it's a long, boring quote, which is like, so it's like, it's like a page and a half long quote about her love for him, right? And it reminded me of Phil Collins. I listened to a podcast once where they talked about Phil Collins' advice on love songs, and he said, keep it simple. Like, people think about love as these overly flowery, metaphorical things, like Saddam does, but really, the best love songs are just so simple, you know? just the Phil Collins line that comes into my mind, and I know this might not be a romantic love song. I think this song isn't about romantic love, but it's about love nonetheless. And it's just the simple line, "You'll be in my heart." Simple. That says so much more than a page and a half of dialogue can ever say. You'll be in my heart. There's this thought, and I guess, especially, I guess, from Saddam's perspective, that, like, when you write about love, it's got to be flowery and metaphorical, and love is such a powerful feeling that you need a lot of words to encapsulate the magnitude of what love is, and you don't. Sometimes the most simplest words is all you need. I mean, is there a paragraph that has made you ever feel as good as an "I love you"? You know what I mean? Like a well-timed "I love you" when you needed to hear it, or when you wasn't expected to come, or you know what I mean. Have you ever had a page and a half make you feel like that? So if there's any aspiring totalitarian dictators out there who want to write a love story, keep it simple, man. Keep it simple. Because the longer you talk, the more you're like, are you making this up? Maybe I could be wrong. I've never been in love, but what do I know about anything? So the king asks Zabiba to be his wife. Zabiba says, "Hey, hold up. Before you ask me that, I am the representative of the people, and to be a queen would destroy her credibility, because once I become a king, my independence will be destroyed, and I have to follow these old rules, and I can't betray the people. I am Zabiba, the will of the people." And I want to point out this real quickly. Throughout the whole book, the editor sometimes writes his own, like, "This is messed up," or "How crazy is this statement?" And it's like, bro, stop. I know you're the editor, but you're here to just translate. Stop adding your own opinions to the story. And I know this story is boring as hell, but in what possible world, Robert Lawrence, did you think you were going to be more interesting than Saddam Hussein? That's why it's his face on the cover of the book and not your stupid face. So stop giving me your opinions. I can form my own. Then we take a step out, and the grandma takes a. You remember, this is a story about the story is being told, from the perspective of a grandma telling her grandkids, and we take a step back into that moment, and the grandma's like, you kids nowadays are so enraptured with celebrity, and that's something Zabiba understood, and that's bad. And then they go back to the story. So Zabiba wants to go home after this meeting with the king, where she responds to the marriage, and the king is like, "Let me give you something to protect you," so like a guard to protect you. And Zabiba's like, "No, I'm the will of the people. It's fine." And then on her way back home, Zabiba gets brutally raped. She's like on her horse. She gets knocked off the horse. She gets tied behind the back. She tries to fight back as long as she can. The guy who rapes her knocks her unconscious. It's like a guy in his gang, but the main guy in the gang knocks her unconscious, rapes her. She comes back, starts fighting. They fight. She bites the dude's neck, like creating a bloody gash in the neck. The dude gets mad, rapes her again. And this is genuinely a heartbreaking scene. It really is. And in a story where none of the characters are terribly interesting, you really do feel for Zabiba. Like, because what she goes through is like, damn, this is what people who deal with this have to go through. She's worried that no one will believe her. She's worried that people will be like, oh, if you didn't resist enough, it's your fault. And, now in modern times, these are the same things people have to go through. Now, back in the 6th century, I'm sure it was even worse. But like, how much worse really? How much better is it really? If someone who's gone through that, I'm sure a lot of women who've gone through that have been like, man, who can I tell? Who can I tell that won't blame me? And she's afraid to tell the king because she thinks the king will see her differently. So it's like, who can, like, that's the thing that they have to go through is like, if I tell the person that I love, will they believe me? Will they look at me differently? Will they think that I secretly wanted it? That's what she goes through here. And it's a very, I don't know, I don't want to say insightful, but it's a very like, damn, this is what this is what a lot of people who go through this go through. And it's crazy that it's written by a guy who rapes a bunch of people. It's like, bro, you give the will of the people. You understand the harshness and the terrible mental toll this could take on you. And yet you do it to the people. These dictators, man, they're split. They have to fight parts of themselves because they can't be whole because they're so terrible. It's crazy. So before she tells the king, she's like, let me go home and wash up so I don't come to the king all messed up so he doesn't think that I was like I wanted it. And when she goes home, she sees her husband wash the blood away from his neck, and she realizes he's the one that did it. He's the one. Which is like such a weird thing because he already rapes her at home. So it's like to pretend to be someone else to do it is like a whole nother level of messed up. Which is, there's this thing about serial offenders of any kind, murderers, assaultists, rapists, that they have to escalate, right? The more they don't get caught. The simple games that they played before couldn't be enough. And they're escalating. The king is escalating to the point, not the king, it was Zabiba's husband's escalating to the point where he has to ambush her and, pretend to be a leader of a gang because doing it at home wasn't enough for him. And Zabiba works out the reason why the husband did it wasn't for his pleasure. So the husband, it turns out, is on the side of the merchants, right? So the merchants are figuring out that more and more Zabiba's turned the king against her. So they are now trying to rise up and fight the king. You don't see them rise up. Zabiba just tells you that's what they're doing, and you just have to take it for her word, right? And her husband's on the side of the merchants against the king. These foreign interests, right? Because her husband is USA. He is the most foreign of the interests, and that's why he's constantly raping the Iraqi people, because that's what the USA does in Saddam's mind, right? So she realizes her husband raped her to send a message to the king, and the message being like, no, to send a message to the people about the king, as if to say, look at the king. He can't even protect the woman he loves from a terrible, terrible fate. So, is this guy fit enough to protect you? It's time to be deposed. And Zabiba realizes, oh, this is the merchants making their first move. They're about to attack the king's palace, and the fight for Iraq is about to happen. That's literally how the story works. It doesn't make any sense. Like I said, Wes Anderson story structure. I mean, it's not exactly like that, obviously, but like in terms of like how it makes sense to me, exactly like that. So Zabiba goes to the king. The king is like, oh man, I can't believe I allowed that terrible assault to happen to you. I'm marred with shame. And the king says he will raise the army. He will raise an army to fight all the bad people. And Zabiba said he will convince the people to fight with the army against the merchants and the foreigners. And so Zabiba goes. He brings back the people. The people come back to the palace with her. Long live the king. Long live Allah. Everyone's fully converted to Islam now because of Zabiba and her talks with the king. And then the merchants and the people fight. And the people win. They beat the merchants. But in the fight, Zabiba takes an arrow to the chest. And as she lay dying, Zabiba dictates her last letter. She accepts the king's marriage proposal and tells the king to get rid of his title and become one of the people. And you might be thinking, oh, that's the story. Because the king listens to her and sets up a council. You might think that's the end of the story, right? Nope. There's 40 more pages after Zabiba dies. And so the next 40 pages are all different stories. So the next 40 pages, there's this council. The People's Council. This is what Zabiba has been talking about this entire time. Set up a council made by the people for the people, and they will decide that they, as a unit, as a democracy almost, as a democracy, will decide the future of this country. So now we actually get to see the People's Council. And in this People's Council, you'll see you'll see that a lot of people who fought on the king's side in the battle for the nation still weren't good people. Some of them were opportunists. And so in this battle, in this council meeting, people talk one by one, and they're either applauded for the efforts or they're booed and kicked out, and they have to get out. So one by one, people stand up and have to leave. Now, if you are a listener to the Dangerous Brown podcast, you'll remember the Ba'ath Party Purge, where Saddam would call people up one by one and tell them to leave, where they would get executed, exiled, kicked out from his government. And that's what this is. This is the Ba'ath Party Purge. And this is where you truly get to see the culmination of what Saddam is the emperor, but he also thinks of himself as Zabiba. He thinks of himself as, I am the council of the people. Look, he's having this purge in this book that mirrors the exact same purge that he did. So that's truly how Saddam sees. He sees himself as the king who needs to get, and this is what I mean that his soul is at war with itself. He sees himself as the king. He sees himself as the representative of the people. The war of the people, right? The representative of the people. He is the council, because the council of the people are the one committing the Ba'ath Party Purge in this book. But in real life, it was him. So he sees himself as the council, that he alone represents the king's will, and he is of the king's will. And I think he sees himself as Zabiba as well. He sees himself as someone who's been assaulted by these foreign governments, especially the United States. There's this one point in the book where they find Zabiba's husband's body, and every January 17th, the people get up and stone Zabiba's husband's body, because of how evil he is. And that's significant because January 17th, 1991 is when Operation Desert Storm started, I believe. It's or that's at least maybe not when it started, because I think it's at least that's when the U.S. invaded Iraq for the first time. And every January 17th, the people stone his body. So yeah, you just hear story after story of the purge, about how story after story of like people standing up and seeing whether or not they're purged. Some people are lauded as heroes. There's one guy who kills all the merchants and all the noblemen who help the merchants. He's a hero. We have another guy who, got all his stuff from his dad, and he's like, how come we gotta follow the old rule? He's laughed out, he's punched out, the stuff is thrown at him as he's out. One guy who is part of the army but didn't take part in the fight to save the king. No, he's just a rich kid who got it because his dad was a general, and he moved up in the ranks and never fought. And he soils the good name of the army, because the army is supposed to be hardworking people who are supposed to lay their lives down for the country, and this man didn't do it, and he lied about fighting in the resistance, and he is exiled from the meeting. He is kicked out of Iraq. There's a Jewish guy there. Hold on, let me see if I can find his name. So funny. I should have written it down. A man raised his hand. Hunter of the thing. Military man. Shamil. Shamil the Jew is there, and he raises his hand, and hey, guess what they do with him, huh? You think he gets to stay or leave? Well, how do you think Saddam Hussein feels about Jews, huh? I won't even answer that, but I think you can fill in the blanks on what happens to him. Is he involved in money lending? Is he involved in lending money and being the banker to both sides? I don't know. Maybe. What do you think Saddam thinks of the Jewish people? I'll leave it at that. And then it just basically ends with one of the women who fight in the resistance standing up and telling this merchant, like, hey, you're either with us or against us. Long live Saddam. And the last words of the book are, may Allah be merciful to all who have died. Praise the martyrs. Praise Zabiba. Long live Zabiba. Long live the people. Long live the army. And that is the end of the book. That is Zabiba and the King, everybody. Wow, I went for 54 minutes. I thought I wasn't going to go this long because this book is just so incredibly boring. This might have been a boring episode for you guys. I'm sorry, but I had to get through what I wanted to get through here. Because I do want these Friday episodes to be like that. Like I've read last 3 Friday episodes. I've read a book. I read a book on Princess Diana. I read this book. I read the Bible. So I'm trying to bring you at least interesting historical content. If you know anything like this, stuff that'd be interesting to read, or like I said, this was a good sort of insight into Saddam and his very broken psyche. And I want to read this stuff so you guys don't have to, because this is just just so terrible and so incredibly boring, and he's so up his own ass and he's so stuffy about it. But if you guys please on the Discord, guys, join the Discord. I'll link the Discord in my bio. If you have any suggestions of stuff I should read or stuff you'd be interested in, like along these lines of these weird historical things, I would absolutely love to do it. I'm open to your suggestions, infidels. Yeah. Next week I have a Wednesday check-in episode. I'm gonna be in Austin from April 11th to the 24th. I'll post shows that I'm on there if you're in Austin. I don't quite know if I'll be able to do Wednesday check-in episodes during that time. I'll release the Friday episodes for sure, but I'll do my best to get some Wednesday check-in episodes to you. I'm just gonna be staying on people's couch, and I don't want to, ruin, be yelling about stuff while they're trying to sleep or whatever. You know what I mean? So. Maybe I'll find a studio or something to rent out during that time. But yeah, that's Zabiba and the King, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you Wednesday or on the Tea Time Lives. I should be going live. I'll be in LA, but I'll try to go live once or twice in LA while I'm there. So later, boys. Peace. And girls, boys and girls. My bad. Later, infidels. I should say. Peace. I'll see you soon. I love you guys.